What's up, you guys? So I'm here with a new video today, and we're here to talk about what Konami got wrong on the May 2018 ban list. In a sense, what cards they missed, problems that needed to be addressed that weren't, and I feel like this will be a really good video for anyone watching. As you know, the dust is starting to settle. Our ban list is out. It will be in effect next week. Every channel under the sun has made their videos on it, given their opinions on it. You guys have seen my very solemn goodbye to that grass looks greener in my last little fun video. That grass no longer looks greener. Yeah, I mean, you got to give up, you got to put decks away when you're kind of forced to. So, it was a great run, and, like I always said, on to another deck. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the things that were missed, because there were several cards missed on this list, and we'll go through kind of, what the meta has been, what the meta will be, and the impact of these cards not being addressed, like what they'll do for those decks. So we're going to start with Pendulum Magicians. Actually, believe it or not, Pendulum Magicians was handled perfectly. That's the one thing, is that I feel they did address that deck correctly. I feel that they took care of the problem, which really was Astrograph Sorcerer, and they went overboard a little bit by getting rid of Starving Venom, because that made it to where you could no longer do the FTK. I was very happy with the fact that they dealt with all the FTKs, but when it comes to addressing Pendulum Magicians anymore, nothing needs to be done. They'll do whatever they're gonna do. My brother Sam's already got a video up with Steven about like some crazy like 5 negate board that playing some cards I think people have never even heard of, and it's just pendulum spam. So I mean, I feel pendulums are gonna find a way to still be in the meta. They probably will not be as strong, obviously, but they'll still find a spot in the meta. But on to the main cards that were missed. So on to True Draco. Masterpiece, good hit. Diagram not being hit was interesting. I really thought that was going to be a hit, but I felt like they decided to keep it around not only because of the Megatins, but also because it provides other decks with that engine, and you can play it in Dinosaurs. Like, even though 60 cards has been hit, you can still play True King, Draco Dinosaurs, whatever you want to call it. You do have Dynamite Knight now. I don't know if they're going to incorporate that into the deck, but they do have the Diagram. Ability to pop the babies and produce stuff is pretty cool. So I feel that by not touching Diagram, it let other decks still try to use the Dragonic Diagram engine. But what they did miss, so the big elephant in the room that a lot of people talked about, was Card of Demise. Now, Card of Demise is interesting because you all know I love this card to death. I first played it at Nationals 2016 when it came out, and I played it in Cleed Demise, and I absolutely loved it. I think the card was nuts. It offered anti-meta strategies like new life. It like breathed new life into them because it was a draw 3, and I mean, it was just nuts. That card was phenomenal, but people have come to see that Card of Demise has really been abused in True Draco, and I feel that this is a card they could have addressed. Now, how could they have addressed it? Some people were really against it. They wanted the card banned. They wanted the card flat out gone from the game, but personally, I think that that is not the right route. I feel like the best thing they could have done is possibly put it at 2, and that would have been fine. I think putting it at 2 would have been great, but they decided to leave it at 3. Now, what does that mean for other decks? Now, if you think about it, how many decks really use Card of Demise outside of Draco? There's not that many decks outside of like border stun decks or anti-meta strategies that really utilize that card, and I feel that because of that, Card of Demise staying at 3, the reason why it stayed at 3 was so that other decks could be viable. And when I say viable, I mean they could be playable at maybe locals and possibly regional level, but they're not going to be anything like through the roof. Now, people have been talking about Paleo. Will Paleo play Card of Demise again? Time will tell. Certain versions have played it. Certain versions have played just Pot of Desires. It just really depends. Paleo got a boost, I guess, in a sense, since Masterpiece is gone, so that was kind of the vein of their existence. But Card of Demise, I think, should have been addressed. Only because it directly is a card that like everyone is just tired of playing against. Personally, I feel like the only reason not to hit Card of Demise, besides the reasons mentioned, is that you can just Ash Blossom it. And honestly, it kind of comes down to what your opponent plays first. If they play if they play Pot of Desires, it's kind of hard to decide, you know, do I want to hit the Desires? Do I want to hit the card of Demise? A lot of times you're just going to hit the Desires. If you're a smart player, you're going to hit the Pot of Desires, because card of Demise, resolving later, you know, drawing 3. I mean, you know, it's really hard. You never know what's going to happen. But personally, I feel card of Demise could have gone to 2. I don't think it was ban worthy at all, but it could have gone to 2, and that would have slowed down some of these stun decks, because I think a lot of these Floodgate decks are going to kind of creep up. You know, maybe they won't do that well at YCSs, but they'll definitely be around. And on that note, we're going to talk about the one Floodgate I feel that was missed on this list as well. If you guys saw Farfetch's channel, he made a really good video about 7 cards that were, you know, not addressed on the ban list. His is a little different than mine. He talked about cards that he felt should have came back. He mentions Maxi, Exciton Knight, etc. I'm not going to mention about stuff that I wanted to come back, but just things I think that should have been addressed just on the list indirectly, like in the sense that they were either ban, limited, etc. And that card is Anti-Spell Fragrance. Anti-Spell Fragrance, out of all the Floodgates, is really one of those cards that says you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! And it really is crazy. It makes it to where a deck cannot function. It makes it to where Pendulum Magicians cannot function as a deck or do what they need to do. And I feel that that's pretty crazy. I feel that a card that flat out says your deck does not work, your deck cannot operate the way it was entitled, you know, the way it was built to, is kind of nuts. I feel that card's been around so long, and it's been a blowout card against so many decks over the last couple formats, that I feel that maybe it was time that they put the card to 1. I don't know if banning it would be the right thing. I feel like a lot of times they're not going to ban that card. I feel like if they're going to touch a Floodgate, they might put it to 1, and then it's going to be, but then at that sense, it's going to be one of those, oh, I drew the Floodgate going first, sorry, at 1 in 40, I drew it, you know, stuff like that. I feel that that was just definitely a card that could have been hit. I think out of all the Floodgates, there's a lot of cards. There's Rivalry of Warlords, Skill Drain, Monarch's Erupt, all these different cards. But if you think about it, Skill Drain's at 1. Monarch's Erupt is just not really that good. People even started cutting it from the deck. And then Rivalry of Warlords is actually really strong. It's strong in Altergeist. It's strong in Draco. It's just not something that I feel they're ever going to really touch, because the card, you know, comes and goes in different formats. And I feel right now it's only good in Draco and only good in Altergeist. You're able to break boards with it, so I feel like the card's fine. Like, there's ways around it. I feel the thing is with Floodgates is that Konami looks at it like that, you know, you got outs to these cards. You have Twin Twisters, you have Cosmic Cyclones, you have Trap Eaters, you have all different kinds of removal. So out of all those, where does the, you know, which Floodgate really does even affect those? And that's Anti-Spell Fragrance. I feel that that was definitely a card that could have been hit to 1. Ban worthy, possibly. I don't know. You guys know I'm pretty justified of where I don't really like banning cards. Even putting them at 1 is fine. But then I can see where the luck or dog, I drew it or I didn't draw it factor comes in. So it's definitely something that probably could have gone on the ban list. But again, it wasn't addressed. I feel that with Anti-Spell Fragrance still being out, Altergeist are going to abuse it. And any deck that can abuse it in their main or side deck is definitely going to abuse it, and it's going to be one of those Floodgates that's going to just, you know, kind of ruin your day, so prepare for that. That's pretty much on, like, Draco kind of stunny decks. And then we're going to get to, like, another elephant in the room that wasn't touched, and that was Trick Stars. Trick Stars are still at full power, and there's an argument of which card should have been hit, and it's interesting because the argument that I have is a little different. So I am the one that believes that Reincarnation should have been hit to 1. I don't think it's ban worthy. Again, it's a Trickstar support card, you know, but what makes it degenerate is Joel and Lockbird. Now I know a lot of people say, well, just hit Joel and Lockbird, ban Joel and Lockbird, put Joel and Lockbird to 1. The problem with that is that if you guys have read any of the Goki cards, they all search. They all, you know, they all Rhoda for themselves. And one thing I'll say is that Droll is going to be necessary in this format because it's necessary to stop the opponent from adding cards. It's good against Startup Engage. The opponent goes Startup Engage, you Droll them. They're not going to get to rinse and repeat it again. They're not going to be able to, you know, do, you know, their combos with Ray and stuff like that when it comes to Brandish. So I feel like Joel and Lockbird is actually a card that is necessary in our format. I 100% agree that when it comes to Droll Reincarnation, Droll is the real problem versus Reincarnation, but I feel like for Trickstars, that card is just so ridiculous because they're always going to combine it with Joel and Lockbird, or they're going to just use it, you know, as utility. And that's the thing, is that Trickstars didn't get hit at all, and I feel like even though they don't have the best tournament representation, they're always there. They're always around, and their pesky little burn is what just ends games. And I feel like Reincarnation being addressed would have been probably the best hit. Again, you can argue Joel and Lockbird, but I'm telling you right now, the way that these decks will play, all the searching, we don't have Max C. I'm not going to talk about Max C, but we don't have Max C like Japan does. Japan has 3 Max Cs, we do not. We have 0 Max Cs. We can't really answer anything when the opponent's special summoning. Joel and Lockbird is inherently one of our best hand traps, because when the searching begins, you can stop it and buy yourself a turn. So that's why I feel Reincarnation should have been addressed in Trickstars versus Joel and Lockbird. I think for sure they should have done something to that card. I'm very surprised they didn't. So that's it for Trickstars. I'm going to talk a little bit about Invoked. You guys know I love Invoked. Mech Knights, leave them alone. They don't, you know, by themselves, they don't really do anything. The reason why Mech Knight Invoked is good is because it fully supports the Invoked engine. And as much as I love the Invoked engine, I feel like if they were going to hit any kind of card, they'd probably do what Japan did. I think they put Alistair to 1, and then they put Makaba to 1. Honestly, I think that was kind of overkill. I probably would just put Makaba to 1, but at that point, you're just playing one main, like, boss monster, you know, with Purgatrio, with possibly Elysium, and then you're just playing a bunch of links, and that's kind of how the deck would go. The engine is going to be splashable in Brandish, but I think Pure Brandish will probably still prove to be the superior deck, the superior build, and more consistent. But definitely, even as an Invoked player, I could say, if you hit Alistair, you basically kind of kill the whole deck, as the whole engine, in a sense, because yes, there's Terraforming, we're gonna get to Terraforming, but there's Terraforming, there's Meltdown, there's Alistair, but the whole point of Terraforming to Meltdown is Meltdown to Alistair. You hit Alistair, it kind of, you know, nullifies the deck. And let's be honest, answering Alistair is not hard. Plenty of hand traps handle Alistair quite easily. If they can Terraforming, and you can just droll them right there. They can summon Alistair, you can Valor it, or you can Ash it, and you just stop right there unless they hard do Invocation. So Makaba is basically their end game. Makaba is usually what they want, a Link monster plus Makaba, and that's usually how they play. I can tell you right now, having played the deck at the last YCS, that's how we play the deck. It's a control deck with Makaba. You address Makaba, the one Makaba is gone, you have to play a new strategy, which is basically Links. So I'm not going to, you know, as much as I love the deck, I'm going to say maybe they could have done something to Invoked, maybe, but Makaba probably would have been the best target for the list. Next, we're just going to talk about one that I know a lot of people have brought up, and that's Firewall Dragon. The reason why Firewall Dragon is addressed so much and people want it banned is because it's the cause of so many problems, and even though it's at 1, it's still the cause of so many problems. It's just, you know, it's not once per turn. It just does crazy things that, you know, make the game nuts. You guys already know about Gokis. If you guys have been paying attention, they extra link you. Firewall is the main way they do it. Had they hit Firewall, it probably would have made it to where Gokis would have to play a different game. With all the Nightmare cards out, they would have to play a different game because Firewall co-linked, etc. And it's definitely one of those cards that I think they saw early on. You know, this is causing so many FTKs, this is causing so many soft locks, and even at 1, it's still doing that. It's definitely a card I think they could have hit. They could have banned it. It's already at 1, so their only other option would be to ban it. So I'm a little surprised they didn't, but again, I think they want, you know, I think that it's one of those show cards, and that's the thing, again, with Card of Demise. When it's a show card, an anime card, like, they're really not going to hit them as much. I feel like that's the only thing that's kind of crazy, is if it's a show card or something used in the series, they're not gonna address it fully. So Firewall is still around, and to be honest, it's a valuable Cherries target. Just saying, like, against Gokis, against a lot of decks, you gotta Cherries that damn thing, because the Nightmare cards are crazy by themselves, but add Firewall into the mix and it just becomes an absolute shit show, to be honest. So Firewall, definitely interesting they didn't touch that. But pretty much those are like the main cards I wanted to talk about. If you look at the other decks of the meta, 60 cards was already addressed, and I know people were saying they should have hit Fairy Tale Snow. The way this would have gone, you guys, is if they would have hit Fairy Tale Snow to 1, Grass probably would have came to 3, and the reason why Grass decks were so good is because Snow exists, and Snow exists at 3. Since they just directly banned that Grass looks greener, we don't have to worry about milling 20 anymore, and Snow will just do what Snow did before Grass existed. And we do have ways to get Snow to the grave, obviously, with our Charge of the Light Brigades, our Solar Recharges, our Fool foolish, etc., etc. But it's definitely not going to be as potent as it was before, because if people still play 60, they're not going to have grass. You can still play 60 and play, you know, just all the engines and all the best cards you can, and just replace the 3 left arm and the grass for something else. But like, I feel overall, if anyone's going to play Lightsworn or whatever, they'll probably go back to 40, or Johnny will come up with some crazy concoction that only Johnny can play. But definitely, that was asked to me a lot. Why didn't they touch Fairy Tale Snow? And that's, you know, that's the main reason. And last thing I'm going to talk about is terraforming. So they hit Ancient Fairy Dragon, they didn't hit terraforming. I think a lot of people were surprised. A lot of people wanted terraforming to go. They felt like outside of the field spells, it's the ability to search field spells that makes them so powerful. Ancient Fairy kind of was another way to do that with Destrudo and all that. It was like a 1 card, you know, your starting combo, make an Ancient Fairy, pop a field card, you know, etc., add a field card. Terraforming enabled that too, because you just terraforming for whatever field card you need. It's interesting they didn't do that. I know in Japan they put terraforming to 1. It's because if you look at all the powerful field spells we have, there's a ton of them. There's still 1 Resort. I know it's only at 1, but that card is so powerful. There's 3 Union Hangers. There's 3 Magical Meltdowns. There's all the field spells for, I think it's for FAs. There's all the field spells for all these different decks. And I feel like they could have done something. They could have put terraforming to 1, but they didn't. So I'm a little surprised by that. I initially had never mentioned that in my prediction list, but after talking to people and seeing what people were saying, it did kind of make sense. If you look at the field spells in the game, it's not the field spells so much that are the problem. It's the fact that they're easily searchable. They're easily able to be accessed and easily be able to be activated quicker than normal, because you can search, you know, them so fast. Like, we have 9 Alistairs in an Invoke deck. It's kind of crazy. We have 6 copies of Union Hanger in an ABC deck. You know, there's a lot of just different things that go into, like, the thinking when it comes to terraforming. But that was another interesting card that wasn't touched. But, I mean, you know, it is what it is. And overall, I think the list was fantastic. I'm not ragging on the list at all. But I think they could have definitely touched more cards and addressed more cards. And, again, one more card is Scapegoat. And I love Scapegoat to death. You guys already know. But, again, Trickstars. Trickstars are not that strong a deck. Everyone knows that their monsters are not that strong, but they win games off Scapegoat, and so does Mech Knight Invoked. Let me tell you, being able to just make a 1-card Borreload is pretty crazy. 1-card Staryuja is crazy, and that's what Trickstars do best. They just make Borreload out of nowhere, and they just be like, oh, okay, cool, well, I burned you to death. I'm going to Borreload you, do more damage, and then when you draw a card, you're probably going to die this turn. So Scapegoat is an insane card. I could not believe when it came to 3, and I'm still shocked it's at 3. I thought for sure it was going to go back to 1, because as a 1 of, again, you know, you're not going to see it as consistently, and when you have it, you have it. It wasn't ban worthy, definitely not ban worthy, but it's kind of crazy that card is still at 3. I mean, I had no idea what it was doing at 3. Same with Mind Control, but Mind Control's kind of lost a little bit of its potency. It's only really used in Mech Knights. I'm not really going to address that, but it's kind of crazy that Scapegoat is still at 3. Like, I mean, you know. But, I mean, I digress. Like, Scapegoat is just, it's going to be around for another format, and it's going to be interesting what it's going to do for other decks. They might splash it in Brandish. True Draco may play it, gives them link options. I think a lot of people forget that, you know, every deck that puts in Scapegoat just builds up the link tree, and I think that since all these new Nightmare cards have come out, it's given Scapegoat so much more fire to work with. So, it's going to be interesting what happens in this format. I think overall, again, it was a great list. I think these are just some of the things that were missed, some of the things that should be addressed. But one thing I will say, I'm very happy that they dealt with all the FTKs. People will argue that there's possibly still FTKs because of Firewall Dragon, and again, that's why we talked about it, but we'll see what happens in this format. We're going to be in a Brandish Altergeist format, and Red Reboot is a hell of a card against that deck, and Brandish, I mean, will just prove, you know, its dominance, or it might just, you know, it might just become one of those engines that is just splashed in everything, kind of like Zoo was, so time will tell. But anyways, that's all I got to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give the video a like. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Team Dank Deals. Let me know what you feel Konami missed on the list. What cards do you feel they missed? Of course, I didn't address them all. That was kind of the point, so that you guys could let me know your thoughts as players. What cards do you think should have been addressed? And when I say addressed, I'm not talking about cards that needed to come back. I'm talking about cards that should have been hidden directly on the list. But yeah, that's all I got to say. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.